Are you about to blow up your retirement nest egg when you leave your employer? Stick around. We will tell you how not to have this happen to your money. A lot of mistakes that people make when they leave their employer. What should they do with that old 401k plan or IRA? This is the show, folks. Welcome. Show's called Your Money, Your Wealth. Right there, Your Money, Your Wealth. Joe Anderson here, certified financial planner, president of Pure Financial Advisors. And I'm with, of course, Alan Clopine. He's the big man. There's Big Al Clopine. He'll be joining us in just a second to break a few things down. But if you look, a lot of you have a 401k plan. Maybe it's a 403b, a TSP, a 457, a 401a. It could be a KEO. It could be a profit sharing, money purchase. The list goes on and on. When you leave that employer, what do you do with that plan? That's today's Financial Focus. If you look here, we got 52 million Americans that have an employer-sponsored plan. It's about 515,000 different plans out there. And most of them have different rules. Should I keep the money in the plan? Should I roll it out? What are the fees and costs of those particular plans? Is there benefits to keep it in the plan for taking it out? Do you want to consolidate or have multiple accounts? Do you think that's diversification? There's a lot of different factors that you want to make sure that you are aware of before you decide to move any money out of an employer-sponsored plan. Let's break it down. Let's bring in Big Al Clopine. Hello, Alan.
How you doing, Mr. Joe?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
So today it's all about 401ks
It is.
and other retirement plans. And there's a lot of confusion, I think, when people retire. What the heck do they do with them?
You know, I think it's timely, too, because the Department of Labor, with the fiduciary rule, and it's looking at retirement plans. And does it make sense for individuals to keep the money in the plan, to roll it out, and what are their options?
Right. Yeah, that's exactly right, Joe. And so as a consequence, on today's show, we're going to dive in, starting with the basics. We'll get into 401k basics, and this will apply to other types of plans as well, but our main focus will be 401ks. And then a big question people have when they retire: should I leave the money in the plan? Should I roll it over to an IRA? We're going to go over pros and cons of both. And then how about avoiding penalties? There are penalties if you take too much money or take it too soon out of your 401k. There's penalties if you don't take enough out when you're age 70 and a half. That's a required minimum distribution. So we want to make sure that you don't fall under that. And then finally, to death do us part. What the heck is that? Well, your 401k, your IRA, it's going to go somewhere when you pass, and so we'll go over some of the things you got to think about. And Joe, I think you're right. Department of Labor there's a new ruling that says people that help advisors,
advisors help clients.
Advisors help clients. Easy for me to say. They have to fall under the fiduciary standard, which I think is a step in the right direction.
Well, it's not passed yet. We'll see. Right? There's been delays and delays and delays, but I think it's important for you to understand. All right, well, first of all, what is a 401k plan, and how can you contribute and how much? In a standard 401k plan for large employers, here's just the basics. It's a pre-tax retirement plan. You can put up to $18,000 into the plan. There's a catch-up provision for those of you over 50. You can get $6,000 in. A couple different caveats. You need earned income. So if you make $20,000, you can still put the $18,000 in, but if you make $5,000, well, then you can only put in $5,000. There is no limit on income and there's no limit on age in an employer-sponsored 401k plan. However, if you do work for a smaller company, and if it's not a safe harbor 401k plan, then there could be some income limitations for highly compensated individuals where they couldn't maximize those plans. So you just want to make sure that you talk to HR to see what your contribution limits are in your particular plan.
Yeah, that is true, Joe. And then, of course, also there's something called a 401k match, and that's where you put money in and your employer puts money in. So that if you've got such a plan, and many of the 401ks out there do have a match provision, so that means that you really want to contribute to the 401k first because of that match. And here's an easy example. In a case where you're putting $5,000 into your 401k per year, in the first column, no match. It's for 30 years, 7%, you end up with $472,000. Really pretty good. But what about with the match? If your employer employer's matching that. In this example, they're putting in $4,000 while you're putting in $5,000 over that same 30 years. You end up with $850,000. It's free money when it's a match. And Joe, I think a lot of times people don't realize the importance of taking advantage of that match.
Well, it's billions of dollars. We just saw
Right.
that slide. We talked about it last week.
We did. We
and
did.
I mean, it's 100% rate of return on your money. If you put in $1, the employer will put in $1. So look at your plan document again. You do not want to leave that money off the table. We're woefully behind on savings, and this is just free money for you. It's an added benefit from your employer, and so why wouldn't you want to take advantage of it? So look at your plan document and make sure that you understand the match, how much money that you should be contributing to get the full match. Try to save to that limit amount, and if you can save more, please do. Try to max the plan out, but at least take advantage of the match. And it's billions and billions of dollars that are left on the table because people are not doing it or don't understand it or even know what the heck the match means.
Right, and it's like you say, you put in $1, the employer puts in $1, so you want to take advantage of that. Now, something relatively new with 401k plans is what's called a Roth Option. And here's a Roth Option, of course, is when you put money in, you don't get a tax deduction, but the money grows tax-free. You never pay another dime on that balance in terms of the principal and the growth. So here's a breakdown of who's actually using the Roth Option. It's the younger people, age 20 to 29. 17% are putting money into the Roth. The 30 to 39-year-olds, it's 13.1%, and so on. You look at the 60-year-olds, Joe, and it's less than 6% are actually taking advantage of that Roth Option.
This is a shame.
It is.
You know, because if you take a look at the Roth option, you put the money in, it's going to be after tax. It's going to go, directly from your paycheck. But all of those dollars are going to grow 100% tax-free. And if you look, only 17 some odd percent of the younger generations, 20 to 29, and they all, I mean, in my opinion, it depends on their income, but that young of age, you have compounding growth tax-free. And then you look at the older generations, they absolutely should be maximizing the Roth options depending on what their tax bracket is. There's such a lack of planning when it comes to taxes in regards to your retirement accounts. The old rules of, let's just pre-tax it, let it grow tax deferred, and then I'll pay the tax out because I'll be in a lower tax bracket is long gone for a lot of individuals that have saved money in retirement accounts. The reason why you hear this all the time is that most people haven't saved money in a retirement account. Not you. People that are watching this show right now, you have saved money in a retirement account, and you want to make sure that you can protect it as much as you can. Taxes will be one of your biggest expenses in retirement. So now it's time to take a look. Are you truly getting the diversification that you need from a tax perspective? All right, we got to take a quick break. When we get back, we're just getting started, folks. You do not want to miss. We're going to talk more about IRAs and 401ks and rules and pros and cons and everything else in between. Hey, welcome back to the show. The show's called Your Money, Your Wealth. Joe Anderson, Big Al. Talking 401ks, IRAs. Should you roll, not to roll? Pros and cons of doing that or not doing that. Before we dive into that, let's get into the true-false question.
There are penalties if I roll my 401k to a Roth IRA before I'm age 59 and a half. Now that's a good question because in terms of Roth conversions, it doesn't really matter what age you do a conversion. Sometimes it's difficult in a 401k to roll it. Best way to roll a 401k, of course, is to first roll it to an IRA and then do a Roth conversion from that point, because you can always recharacterize it in the following year. If you have a plan, a 401k plan that has a Roth option, you can generally roll, or I should say convert into a Roth IRA in terms of the Roth component of the 401k, but you cannot undo it. It's a one-way street, Joe, so you kind of got to be careful there.
All right, so the question I believe was, can I, avoid a 10% penalty if I convert a IRA to a Roth IRA before 59 and a half? That is a key component here. If you're under 59 and a half and if you move money to an IRA to a Roth IRA, there is no 10% penalty. You can do a Roth IRA conversion at any age. However, a 10% penalty would apply if you withheld taxes. So be very careful when you're doing conversions So let's say if I convert $100,000 and I withhold 20% of that. So, all right, well, 20 grand is going to be withheld. If I'm under 59 and a half, that 20,000 of tax withholdings would be assessed a 10% penalty. The conversion itself avoids the 10% penalty, but if I try to pay taxes with those dollars, that would be assessed the 10% penalty. So you always want to pay taxes outside of your retirement account if you do the conversion. Al was also talking about if I want to do an interplan conversion. If you have a Roth 401k and a traditional 401k, can I take the traditional 401k component and move it into the Roth? Yes, the law changed a couple of years ago to do an interplan conversion. So don't withhold taxes there either. Pay the tax next April when you do your taxes, but remember what Al said, that is unforgiven. You can't recharacterize that back into the traditional. So you really want to make sure you know what you're doing there.
Yeah, Joe, and sometimes some plans allow for in-service withdrawals, but usually that's at 59 and a half. So you may not be able to do this very well in terms of the recharacterization. But we get that question a lot in terms of the penalty, and yeah, you can do a Roth conversion of any type without the 10% penalty at any age. So just be aware of that. So I guess at this point of the show, Joe, we've got a question from one of our viewers, and we call this Countdown to Retirement.
Hey Joe, I have multiple IRAs and I have multiple Roths. Is there any advantages or disadvantages to combining all of the Roths or all of the standard IRAs?
That just kind of goes right in line with what our show is. Usually we talk about IRAs and I get a question about gold. So the question, yeah, I think it makes sense. If they're all IRAs, why not consolidate? You might have one at Vanguard, Fidelity, Merrill Lynch, Smith Barney, whatever. It makes no difference. That's not necessarily diversification. If you combine it all, it makes it a lot easier to manage. When you're looking at managing your risk, rebalancing the overall account, making sure that you don't have too much in stocks or too much in bonds or too much in any asset class that you choose. When you have multiple accounts, it gets very difficult. What we see is a lot of overlap of similar investments, and that might just increase cost, might increase your risk, and then you're not really handling as well as you could. So consolidation, I think, is key if they're IRAs. Now, if it's a 401k to IRA, and if you want to consolidate those, that's a different story. We're going to get into that in just a second when it comes to the pros and cons.
I concur. I think if you got multiple Roth accounts and multiple IRA accounts, you might as well put them into one because it's so much easier to manage and keep track of things, keep track of your rates of return and so forth. So I think at this point of the show, Joe, we're gonna move over to talking about whether you should leave your 401k leave your money in a 401k when you retire, or should you roll it to an IRA, or perhaps maybe you should cash your money out. We'll go over pros and cons of all three. And right off the bat, Joe, let's talk about pros on leaving your 401k at your employer upon retirement. One is it's very simple. There's no new account to set up. It certainly remains tax deferred until withdrawals. Large 401k plans may have reduced fees. Your employer may have negotiated reduced fees, which could be a benefit. Here's a big one. You may have penalty-free withdrawals at age 55. And Joe, I think a lot of people don't really know what that means. It means that if you are in a plan, right, and you retire at age 55, you can actually get at those dollars. Of course, you have to pay taxes on them, but you don't have to pay that 10% penalty.
Right, it's not the 59.5 rule with 401k plans. It's 55. So if you retire at 55, you separate from service from your employer, there is no 10% penalty. I think most people know the 59.5 rule, but it's 55 in a 401k plan. Another important component of keeping it in the plan is that there is ERISA protection. And so if there's creditors, lawsuits, bankruptcy, and things like that, it's under ERISA under a 401k plan. If you move it into another plan, it really depends on your state, which we'll get into a little bit later. But there's a lot of really good reasons to keep it in the plan. But then there's also some cons of keeping it in the plan too, Al.
Yeah, there are some cons. And right off the bat, it's just simplicity. Like if you have a bunch of 401ks and a bunch of IRAs, you might want to consolidate those into a single IRA. It's much simpler. The plans the 401k plan may have limited investment options, and after-tax contributions are less favorable in a 401k because there's a relatively new rule that says that you can take your after-tax contributions in a 401k and you can roll those directly to a Roth IRA. So not only, Joe, do those contributions, they're tax-free, of course, but all future earnings are tax-free as well.
So here's the problem. If I keep it in the 401k plan, and if I have after-tax earnings in that 401k plan, I've already paid tax on it. It's after tax. Those would come out to me tax-free. But if it sits in a 401k plan, you're going to get pro rata treatment. And so your distributions, some of it is going to be taxable and some of it's going to be tax-free depending on how much after-tax contributions that you have inside your plan. So here's the best part about rolling it out is that you can isolate that after-tax contribution and you can move that directly into a 401 or into a Roth IRA. It's a huge, huge benefit. So if you do have after-tax contributions, you absolutely probably want to roll that money right out of the plan and put it into a Roth.
And Joe, if we think about now, here's some pros of actually rolling it to an IRA. You generally have more investment choices. You can consolidate multiple accounts. Certainly it remains tax deferred until withdrawal. And you can roll that after-tax contribution directly to a Roth, just as we mentioned. And that's a huge advantage for a lot of you that have after-tax dollars to roll that directly to a Roth so that all future growth in that particular account will be tax-free.
And I think there's a few more. I mean, we're trying to get a lot of print on these slides here. So if you're having trouble reading it, don't worry about it. So are we.
Yeah.
But if you go back, there's other pros here. It's if you have, let's say, stock inside your retirement plan, you can do a net unrealized appreciation. So there's a lot of different things that you want to make sure that you consider. Some of the cons is that, well, it could be more expensive if you roll it from your 401k. You know, some advisors, I guess, might be wanting to sell you maybe high commission products, so you want to be careful there. And then we talked about the penalty-free withdrawals. Also, if you move it into an IRA, like with bankruptcy protection, is that you're fine. It's a retirement account. If it comes from a 401k and goes into an IRA, you're good there. But some creditors, so if you're getting sued or if you're highly prone to get sued for something, right? You get in a car accident, you're a bad driver, right? If you get sued, the ERISA plans, 401k plans, have more protections than an IRA. But it really depends on your state. The state of California, which we live in, they'll say, all right, well, here, we'll protect as much of your retirement account for you to continue your retirement lifestyle. But anything after that could be subject to creditors. There's other ways to protect yourself, but it gets a little bit more too in-depth for this show. But just understand that there's pros and cons to every move that you make. In most cases, in my opinion, I think it makes more sense to control your money into an individual retirement account. If I have company stock inside my 401k plan, I can do net unrealized appreciation. If I have after-tax contributions, I can move that directly into a Roth IRA. I have multiple choices. I can get into really low-cost index funds, exchange-traded funds. I can control the risk. I can get into individual stocks if I want to, individual bonds, FDIC-insured CDs. This is really your choice, though. You want to make sure that you take a look at your options and see what makes the most sense for you before you make any type of decisions. Because once you start moving your money around, this is where you need a tax advisor. That's why Big Al is Big Al, right? He's got a big brain. He knows all about taxes. And we've seen a lot of people make huge mistakes and blow up their overall retirement plans because they don't know the tax implications of this.
Right, and one of those tax implications is penalties, and that's if you're withdrawing money at the wrong time. For example, if you take an early withdrawal, if you take money out of your IRA before age 59 and a half, or 401k, if you retired after 55, then you're penalty free, but before that age, you got to pay a 10% penalty. And then, of course, required minimum distributions. A lot of people don't realize this. So at age 70 and a half is where you have to take money out of that IRA, and if you don't, it's a 50% penalty. So that means if you're supposed to take $100,000 out of your IRA, or 401k for a required distribution. Well, first of all, it means you got a big balance, which is great.
$100,000 distribution.
But secondly,
you got about $4 million.
You got to pay a $50,000 penalty if you don't do it.
Oh, yeah, let's say you're a normal person, then you have a $20,000, $10,000 distribution, right? You forgot to take your required distribution. God forbid you start forgetting things in your 70s and your 80s. If you do not take that mandate by law, it's a 50% tax penalty. It's one of the most egregious tax penalties in the code. There's $24 trillion sitting in retirement accounts, and the IRS is salivating. They want that money. They want to get it out of these accounts so they can tax it. So be careful when you're looking at required distributions. If you have multiple accounts, they might have different rules. So that's why consolidation as well might be a little bit easier on you. All right, hey, we got to take another break. When we get back, we're going to flip the show to you, answer your great email questions, and then we're going to wrap things up. All right, we're just getting started. Hey, welcome back. Your Money, Your Wealth. Joe Anderson and Alan Clopine hanging out here talking about should you roll or not roll your 401k to an IRA. Wrapping up the show here. Before we do that, let's get to the true false.
At age 70 and a half, I can no longer contribute to my company's 401k. Good question. That is absolutely false because you can. There's actually no age restriction on 401ks. Interestingly enough, you can only contribute to an IRA until you're age 70 and a half. You can contribute to a Roth IRA at any age, just like a 401k. But no, if you're older and you're in your 70s or even 80s and still working, have a 401k, you can still contribute to that plan.
Yeah, another caveat to that, Al, is that there is no required minimum distribution if you're still an active participant in a 401k plan after 70 and a half. So if you're still contributing to the plan, which you can, then you don't have to take the money out of that 401k plan at 70 and a half. But it's weird, right? IRAs, you can no longer contribute to an IRA after 70 and a half. But 401ks and 403bs, you're all good. So, hey, what if you die, Alan, with this retirement account? There's some complicated rules when it comes to that.
Well, there's a lot of things to remember, Joe, when you pass away. One of which, as you can see right here, is the beneficiary statement is rules. In other words, it doesn't matter what you put in your will or your trust when it comes to a 401k or an IRA, it's the beneficiary statement. So if you've got a beneficiary, like let's say you got married and divorced and forgot to change that beneficiary, you got a new spouse, and you pass away, it goes to the old spouse. So make sure that those are up to date. This is something we recommend you look at regularly, maybe once a year, just to make sure that you've got the right beneficiary. Right, and that's only if it is an IRA or a non-ERISA plan. 401ks, if you are married, then it will go to your existing spouse. But IRAs, that's a totally different rule. So be careful. It's weird. There's 401ks and IRAs. They have different rules. When you pass away, it's the non-spouse beneficiaries. That's where it gets a little bit confusing too, because these retirement accounts are embedded with tax. You have the tax deduction going in. Now they've deferred for 10, 20, 30, 40 years. There's a lot of embedded gain in here, and you've never paid tax on those dollars. You've been taking some required distributions out, and then when you pass away, that's where you have to be extremely careful. That's where some information and education comes into play for the non-spouse beneficiaries. Al and I have seen many occasions where IRAs or 401ks have completely disintegrated? What is that word? Disintegrated.
It blew up?
Disintegrated.
Disintegrated.
Anyway, Joe, a couple more things, and that is sometimes people think that when they pass away, maybe the kids won't have to pay taxes on that 401k or IRA. That's false. They take over your same position, and realize there are very different rules if you're the spouse versus non-spouse. Non-spouse has to start taking required minimum distributions. It's called a beneficiary IRA within the year after, April 1st, the year after that the person passed away. And that's at any age. It could be age 20, it could be age 30, it doesn't really matter. It's not that age 70 and a half, right? And I guess finally, Joe, it's the non-spousal beneficiary can open up a stretch IRA, at least under current law. And so that's a really good thing. That stretches that tax liability. You take so much per year, right, and you have a lower liability. You don't have to take all that money all at one time.
Yeah, it gets a little bit more complex there. But for instance, let's say you have a beneficiary that's 5 years old. Their life expectancy, let's say, is age 85. All right, you pass away, it goes to the grandchild, the 5-year-old. Because they're 5 years old, you're thinking, hey, they don't have to take a required distribution. The answer is yes, if they set up the titling correctly. So it'd stay in your name. Let's say it's me, Joseph Anderson, deceased on whatever date that I died, for the benefit of Junior. Junior's 5 years old, now he has this retirement account. Junior has to take a required distribution. He's 5 years old, I get it, but he still has to get money out of that account. So if he's 5 years old, life expectancy is age 85, right? So then it would be 1/80th out of the account. They want everything to get out of that account and pay tax. Of course, Junior's 5 years old. He doesn't have a big tax bracket. It depends on what the account balance is going to determine what amount is going to come out based on that percentage. So retirement accounts, it's very complex when it comes to should I roll or not to roll? Should I pass it to the next generation? How do you do it effectively? Should I convert, not to convert? Do I have a required distribution or not? A lot of information we shared with you today. Hopefully you got a couple of nuggets. I want to thank Big Al. Without his big brain, we would not have gone through this show today. Hey, we'll be back again next week. Don't go anywhere. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone.